Hey guys, tonight we are slipping quietly into the warm glow of Olympus, not through thunder, war cries, or dramatic affairs, but through something far more subtle, the gentle flicker of a hearth flame, and the soft footsteps of the goddess who kept the whole divine household running like a well-oiled amphora. You're arriving not as a hero or a monster slayer, but as an intern. That's right, Olympus's newest immortal assistant. Your supervisor? Hestia, goddess of the hearth, keeper of the sacred flame, and patron saint of everyone who's ever cleaned up someone else's ambrosia spill without so much as a thank you. You'll soon realize, you probably wouldn't survive a week up here. The gods are loud, opinionated, and allergic to chores. But Hestia, she's been keeping the peace since long before thunderbolts were cool. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it by you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off the celestial lift, carved from moonstone, obviously, and immediately nearly trip over Hermes' sandals. They're spinning like windmills in the corner. No one's picking them up. There's a faint smell of burnt nectar. Somewhere in the background, Ars and Athena are arguing over a board game that's somehow made of spears. You turn to Hestia, poised, calm, completely unbothered by the divine chaos swirling around her. She hands you a broom. It's gold-plated, but it's still a broom. Your job. Keep the flame steady, she says, as if that clears anything up. Then she smiles, soft, serene, the kind of smile that makes you feel like maybe you can sweep clouds, and goes back to arranging offerings by scent. Peach before pomegranate, obviously. The hearth is the literal center of Olympus. Not metaphorically. It's right there, at the core of the Great Hall. No matter how many gods slam doors, start fires, or flirt aggressively with constellations, the flame never wavers. That's Hestia's doing. It always burns low and warm, never too bright. It smells faintly of lavender and baked figures. And you're now the assistant flamekeeper. Congratulations. Over the course of your first day, you start to notice things. The way Hestia rearranges the cushions when Aphrodite storms in, like she knows she'll need to lie dramatically across them in exactly 3 minutes. How she preemptively puts out extra food when Hermes is about to accidentally forget his lunch. The way she listens, nods, hums, and gently suggests everyone just take 5 deep breaths and a seat near the fire. Historians still debate whether the hearth at Olympus ever actually needed tending. Was it magical? Symbolic? A metaphor for divine stability? Or was Hestia literally just there, every day, sweeping up immortal crumbs and relighting it with olive oil and sheer will? What is certain is that ancient Greeks believed their own homes mirrored this great cosmic hearth. That in every household, the little fire in the center was a divine echo of Hestia's flame. You, right now, are part of that tradition, which is a fancy way of saying you've inherited a job with no vacation days and a constantly shifting list of sacred snacks to organize. There's no throne for Hestia here. Every other god has one, carved, engraved, probably embroidered with dramatic family crests. Hestia. She prefers to sit on a plain stool near the fire, knitting something that looks like a dish towel but might be a star chart. When Zeus throws another party, theme, lightning chic, she's the one who keeps the ambrosia warm and the egos cool. At one point, Ars asks you where the spears are stored. You tell him you don't know. He raises an eyebrow. Hestia gently places a tray of hunted figs in his hands and whispers something that makes him smile and leave. You're not sure what just happened, but you write it down in your immortal intern journal. The gods, despite their power, are hilariously bad at basic tasks. Hera tried to use the hearth to toast barley the other day and somehow summoned a minor weather system. Apollo tuned his lyre too close to the fire and melted 3 strings. Dionysus left grapes near the flame and invented something that might be marmalade or disaster. Through it all, Hestia glides quietly, steady as the embers, resetting cushions, trimming wicks, and humming a song no one else remembers. One night, Olympus's version of night being a gentle lavender haze over the clouds, you ask her why she doesn't just leave. You could be the star, you say. Poseidon's got temples. Athena has statues. Hermes is on every coin. You're a folding towels. She looks at you with that same soft smile and says, because someone has to make the space feel safe. Power isn't the only divine gift. Then she sprinkles powdered cinnamon into the fire and watches the sparks dance. You nod, slowly. Then you burn your finger on the hearthhook and learn why Hestia always uses tongs. And so, you settle in. You start to understand the rhythm. Every god is chaos incarnate, but Hestia? She's the pause between waves. The deep breath. The spoonful of soup when your soul is tired. You fall asleep that night curled near the fire, head resting on a cushion she placed without you noticing, blanket smelling faintly of thyme. And the flame flickers on, soft, steady, eternal. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off the celestial lift, carved from moonstone, obviously, and immediately nearly trip over Hermes' sandals. They're spinning like windmills in the corner. No one's picking them up. There's a faint smell of burnt nectar. Somewhere in the background, Ars and Athena are arguing over a board game that's somehow made of spears. You turn to Hestia, poised, calm, completely unbothered by the divine chaos swirling around her. She hands you a broom. It's gold-plated, but it's still a broom. Your job. Keep the flame steady, she says, as if that clears anything up. Then she smiles, soft, serene, the kind of smile that makes you feel like maybe you can sweep clouds, and goes back to arranging offerings by scent. Peach before pomegranate, obviously. The hearth is the literal center of Olympus. Not metaphorically. It's right there, at the core of the great hall. No matter how many gods slam doors, start fires, or flirt aggressively with constellations, the flame never wavers. That's Hestia's doing. It always burns low and warm, never too bright. It smells faintly of lavender and baked figures. And you're now the assistant flamekeeper. Congratulations. Over the course of your first day, you start to notice things. The way Hestia rearranges the cushions when Aphrodite storms in, like she knows she'll need to lie dramatically across them in exactly 3 minutes. How she preemptively puts out extra food when Hermes is about to accidentally forget his lunch. The way she listens, nods, hums, and gently suggests everyone just take 5 deep breaths and a seat near the fire. Historians still debate whether the hearth at Olympus ever actually needed tending. Was it magical? Symbolic? A metaphor for divine stability? Or was Hestia literally just there, every day, sweeping up immortal crumbs and relighting it with olive oil and sheer will? What is certain is that ancient Greeks believed their own homes mirrored this great cosmic hearth. That in every household, the little fire in the center was a divine echo of Hestia's flame. You, right now, are part of that tradition, which is a fancy way of saying you've inherited a job with no vacation days and a constantly shifting list of sacred snacks to organize. There's no throne for Hestia here. Every other god has one, carved, engraved, probably embroidered with dramatic family crests. Hestia. She prefers to sit on a plain stool near the fire, knitting something that looks like a dish towel but might be a star chart. When Zeus throws another party, theme, lightning chic, she's the one who keeps the ambrosia warm and the egos cool. At one point, Ars asks you where the spears are stored. You tell him you don't know. He raises an eyebrow. Hestia gently places a tray of hunted figs in his hands and whispers something that makes him smile and leave. You're not sure what just happened, but you write it down in your immortal intern journal. The gods, despite their power, are hilariously bad at basic tasks. Hera tried to use the hearth to toast barley the other day and somehow summoned a minor weather system. Apollo tuned his lyre too close to the fire and melted 3 strings. Dionysus left grapes near the flame and invented something that might be marmalade or disaster. Through it all, Hestia glides quietly, steady as the embers, resetting cushions, trimming wicks, and humming a song no one else remembers. One night, Olympus's version of night being a gentle lavender haze over the clouds, you ask her why she doesn't just leave. You could be the star, you say. Poseidon's got temples. Athena has statues. Hermes is on every coin. You're a folding towels. She looks at you with that same soft smile and says, because someone has to make the space feel safe. Power isn't the only divine gift. Then she sprinkles powdered cinnamon into the fire and watches the sparks dance. You nod, slowly. Then you burn your finger on the hearthhook and learn why Hestia always uses tongs. And so, you settle in. You start to understand the rhythm. Every god is chaos incarnate, but Hestia? She's the pause between waves. The deep breath. The spoonful of soup when your soul is tired. You fall asleep that night curled near the fire, head resting on a cushion she placed without you noticing, blanket smelling faintly of thyme. And the flame flickers on, soft, steady, eternal. The next morning, or what passes for morning on Olympus, which is less sunrise and more Apollo strutting past at full volume with golden rays trailing behind him, you wake up to the gentle clinking of bronze bowls and the smell of warm bread. Hestia, already awake, has somehow brewed tea from something that looks like cloud vapor and lemon thyme. She hands you a cup. "You'll need this," she says. You sip it. It tastes like calm. As you settle in by the hearth again, she begins to talk, softly, almost absent-mindedly, about her childhood, which is to say, the creation of the universe. She is the firstborn of the Titans Cronus and Rhea, the very first Olympian. Which sounds fancy, until you learn that being firstborn in Titan speak meant you were the first to get eaten by your own father. Cronus, in his never-nominated for Parent of the Year attempt to dodge a prophecy about being overthrown by one of his kids, decided to preemptively eat all of them. Hestia was swallowed whole, no chewing, apparently, and sat there in his divine belly for what might have been centuries. Historians still argue whether time even worked the same way in a Titan stomach. Eventually, of course, Zeus came along. He was the youngest and the only one who didn't get eaten, thanks to a clever baby switching scheme involving a rock in a blanket. When he grew up, Zeus tricked Cronus into vomiting up his siblings, fully grown, mildly annoyed, and a little gooey. And out came Hestia. First in, first out. The goddess of beginnings and endings. It's poetic if you think about it too long. You ask her what it was like, being swallowed by your own dad and then spat out like a mythological hairball. She shrugs. "Quiet," she says. "I didn't mind the stillness." That's the thing about Hestia. She doesn't glorify her trauma. She doesn't demand temples because of her suffering. She just gets up, brews tea, and makes sure nobody's ambrosia boils over. She's the divine embodiment of the phrase, "keep calm and tend the fire." As she tends the hearth, she tells you more. About how, after the Olympians overthrew the Titans, there was a lot of yelling. Zeus wanted a sky throne. Poseidon wanted the sea. Hades, in a weird power move, asked for the underworld. Hestia, she just asked to stay put. She wanted the hearth, the center, the part that held it all together. And the others, perhaps out of guilt, or maybe because they'd rather not fight someone who didn't fight back, agreed. There's an odd kind of reverence around her. The other gods don't bow, but they never yell near her either. Even Ars, whose whole personality is shouting, lowers his voice slightly when asking if there's any warm honey left. You're helping her stack kindling now, olive branches tied with thread and rosemary, when she casually mentions that she's technically older than Hera. You blink. That means that Hestia, not Hera, is the true queenly first lady of Olympus. Hestia waves it off. Hera enjoys the crown. Let her. No bitterness, just a gentle stirring of coals. This is one of those things scholars still can't quite agree on. In some accounts, Hestia's status as firstborn should place her in the highest rank, possibly even giving her authority equal to Zeus. But she never claims it. Maybe because power isn't her thing. Or maybe because she knows that ruling Olympus is a bit like managing a really overfunded daycare. She's not here for the crown. She's here for the calm. The warmth of the hearth draws in all kinds of visitors. Nymphs with wildflower crowns. Satyrs sneaking in for leftovers. One time, a very confused philosopher wandered in from the mortal realm and spent 10 minutes trying to debate with the fire itself. Hestia gave him a cookie and sent him on his way. There's a theory, a fringe one, that Hestia is the only Olympian who never once left Mount Olympus. Not even to wander. Not to meddle in mortal affairs. Not to transform into a swan or a golden rain cloud like certain other deities who will remain nameless. She just stayed. By the fire. Always present. Always centered. You start to understand it, bit by bit. There's something sacred in her stillness. Something divine in not needing to be seen to be felt. Later that day, you overhear Athena and Apollo arguing about whether logic or music best represents divine perfection. They're mid-debate, speaking in iambic pentameter for no apparent reason. You glance at Hestia, who's gently stirring a pot of something fragrant, and ask her who she thinks is right. She pauses. They're both loud, she says. And that's it. That's the entire answer. You think about embroidering it on a throw pillow. By now, You're starting to feel the rhythm of Olympus. The noise rises, the arguments flare, the ambrosia drips, but the hearth stays steady. So does Hestia. She adds a pinch of oregano. She tells a story about a time Hermes tried to roast marshmallows and set a toga on fire. She pats your shoulder when you drop a tray of pomegranate seeds. And you begin to notice how the whole place orbits her. Not obviously, but subtly. Like how you always face the fire, even without meaning to. Or how your voice naturally drops when she enters a room. That night, as the sky turns to velvet and the stars flicker like distant fireflies, you curl up again by the hearth. The cushions are warm. The flames hum quietly. Hestia hums, too, an old tune, older than language, something you feel in your chest more than hear with your ears. And as sleep drifts closer, you think, maybe the gods need thunderbolts. But you just need the fire. It's your third day on Olympus, and today's lesson is, fire is not a metaphor. At least not here. You're kneeling beside the hearth, carefully adjusting a cluster of figwood twigs, when Hestia leans over your shoulder and whispers, "Too much kindling and it'll singe the olives." You glance over. There's a bowl of green olives warming near the flame, because apparently even snacks get VIP treatment here. You learn that fire, for Hestia, is sacred in both the celestial and the practical sense. In ancient Greek homes, the hearth wasn't just a place to make stew. It was the center of the household, physically, socially, and spiritually. It was where you cooked, gathered, performed rituals, and swore oaths. When a new home was founded, coals from the family hearth were carried to light the new one, connecting generations through shared flame. You think about that as you gently stoke the embers. Every ancient Greek home, every temple, every town square, each had a piece of Hestia, burning quietly at its heart. No divine pyrotechnics, no heavenly light shows. Just a warm, steady flicker. The ancient version of a "you got this" pat on the back. One of the other immortals, Artemis, maybe, wanders by, sniffs the air, and says, "Smells like Thessaly in spring." You blink, unsure whether that's a compliment or a warning. Hestia just smiles and sprinkles a few lavender petals onto the coals. Here on Olympus, the fire doesn't run on logs. It runs on memory, on intention. Sometimes it smells like honey and sage, sometimes like sea salt and thyme. It's as if Hestia changes the scent to suit the mood, like emotional aromatherapy, but divine. You're still thinking about the logistics of this when she starts talking about fire worship in ancient Greece. Not worship exactly, she says, gently nudging a coal into place. More like respect. People fed their hearths like they fed each other. Every meal, every family gathering, began and ended with a quiet offering to Hestia. A drop of wine, a bit of barley, maybe a sliver of lamb if the gods were feeling generous. Historians still debate whether these rituals were more symbolic or practical. Was it just tradition, or did people really believe their hearth fire had a personality? You look at Hestia, serene and composed as she rearranges a bundle of cinnamon sticks, and decide it was both. Your job today is to relight the flame using the old method. This turns out to involve a curved bronze mirror, sunlight, and approximately zero wind. You spend a good hour adjusting the angle while a passing cloud makes things difficult. Patience, Hestia says, sipping something warm from a clay cup. The fire knows when it's wanted. Eventually, the beam catches. A tiny curl of smoke, a glowing thread, and then, poof, a flame, golden and soft. It's not flashy, but you feel weirdly proud, like you've passed a sacred test. Hestia nods, the barest hint of a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Well done," she says. "Now don't burn the olives." That night, she tells you about how every city in Greece kept a public hearth, lit with fire from Hestia's eternal flame. When colonies were founded, a portion of that fire was carried to the new land, like a piece of the homeland itself. It was the most literal version of keeping the home fires burning. There's one story she shares, almost absently, while rebraiding the rugs near the hearth. An old woman in a tiny town, so old she could barely stand, would still wake each morning to check the hearth, just to see if it was still burning. She wasn't afraid of the dark, Hestia says, just of letting the memory fade. You blink. For a moment, you think you hear the fire crackle in response. Then there's the whole issue of household gods, lesser spirits that mortals would honor alongside Hestia. You'd leave offerings for them, too, but it was always Hestia who came first. Even Zeus, king of drama himself, had to wait. First and last, Hestia says, gently nudging a coal. That was the tradition. You wonder aloud why she's not in more myths, why the stories always focus on battles, monsters, love affairs gone wildly off course. Hestia shrugs. I'm not very dramatic, she says. No one wants to hear a story where nothing explodes and everyone gets along. But that's not quite true, is it? You're listening now to the small sounds, the sigh of the fire, the rhythm of Hestia's movement, the way the stories, though soft, curl around you like warm smoke. Later, as you try to clean soot from your robes, badly, Hestia teaches you the trick, a blend of olive oil and crushed bay leaves. Just enough to lift the shadow, she says. You wonder if she means the stain or something else entirely. You sleep near the hearth again that night. The fire has changed scent. Now it smells like baked apples and cedar. You wrap yourself in a blanket that smells like yesterday's thunderstorm, and Hestia hums that same song again, low and slow. Somewhere on earth, a child is lighting a candle. Somewhere else, a baker's oven glows before dawn. Somewhere, a temple's flame still burns, untended, unnoticed, but alive. And here, on Olympus, you tend the center of it all. You wake to find Zeus in the kitchen. Now, kitchen might be generous. It's more of a celestial alcove with floating jars of spices, ever-warm cauldrons, and one magical teapot that never stops whistling. Zeus, despite being king of Olympus and possessor of lightning bolts and questionable decision-making skills, is holding a ladle like he's diffusing a bomb. I just wanted to make porridge, he says, staring mournfully into a bubbling pot. For morale. Hestia gently slides in beside him, nudges the flame beneath the cauldron down to a gentler simmer, and adds 2 cloves and a dash of crushed barley. Zeus watches, mystified. Is that legal? He mutters. She smiles. You suppress a laugh and offer him a spoon. This is how you learn about Olympian sibling dynamics, a phrase that should come with a thunderstorm warning. Hestia is the eldest of the 6 siblings. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus. That's 2 agricultural goddesses, 1 underworld landlord, 1 sea god, 1 weather tyrant, and 1 quiet woman with a good posture and a basket of herbs. They do not get along. Well, more precisely, they get along around Hestia. She's the only one who can share a room with all 5 without someone getting turned into a shrub or emotionally blackmailed. You start to realize her real divine power isn't fire, it's conflict avoidance. Sacred, ancient, master-level diplomacy. The day unravels as usual. Hera accuses Zeus of something. Zeus denies it badly. Poseidon slams a fish on the table. Demeter sulks about the seasons. Hades sends a polite letter declining dinner invitations until spring. And through it all, Hestia tends the fire. Let them burn themselves out, she murmurs. They always do. Historians still argue whether Hestia ever wielded power in a conventional sense. Did she smite? Did she curse? Did she even own a weapon? There's no record of her raising her voice, let alone her hand. And yet, everyone listens. Eventually, in one corner of the room, you notice a scene that sums it up perfectly. Apollo is trying to compose a new ballad, but his lyre keeps going out of tune. Ars offers to smash the problem, which Apollo ignores. Hermes suggests trading the lyre for a kazoo. Aphrodite critiques the lighting. Then Hestia, without looking up, says, try tuning it near the eastern wall. The air's steadier there. Apollo blinks, moves, strums. The lyre hums with perfect clarity. He says nothing, but you catch him glancing her way later, lips twitching like he might smile. There's a curious story Hestia tells you while you're pressing incense cones into small bronze bowls. It's about a time Hera and Demeter had a fight over some ceremonial flowers. Yes, flowers, and the whole of Olympus turned sour. Fogs rolled in. Birds flew backward. Ambrosia refused to ferment. And Hestia. She just added lemon peel to the hearth. Sweetened the air. Heated some honey cakes. Didn't say a word. By the next morning, the fog had lifted and the goddesses were politely ignoring each other again. Coincidence? Probably not. You ask if that ever annoys her. If being the divine equivalent of a cosmic babysitter gets exhausting. Hestia tilts her head. It's not babysitting, she says. It's hosting. The house is only as calm as its hearth. You remember something you read once. In Greek tradition, guests were sacred. To offer someone food, warmth, and a fire was to honor the gods. That tradition came from her. Hestia wasn't just the fire, she was the promise of peace. The rule that said, here, in this circle of warmth, no one stabs anyone. At least until dessert. You're polishing a brass kettle now, gently, because last time you were too vigorous and it temporarily turned into a crow. When Hestia shares another quirk of her divine resume, she never left Olympus for war. Not once. Even when giants attacked, even when the sky shook and gods rallied with spears and shouts, she stayed. Someone had to mind the flame. This refusal to participate in drama isn't weakness. It's sacred stillness. Hestia's power lies in presence, not performance. It becomes clear to you, as another minor argument breaks out over seating arrangements, that Hestia is the secret scaffolding of Olympus. She doesn't build it. She doesn't decorate it. She holds it still. Later, after the kerfuffle dies down, it involved a golden beanbag chair and, surprisingly, a goose. You find yourself sitting beside her again. You don't get much credit, you say quietly. She shrugs. Some things don't need applause. Just warmth. There's a long pause. The fire crackles. Somewhere in the distance, Hermes starts a juggling routine with enchanted apples. You hear a crash. Hestia doesn't look up. I'll make tea, she says. And so the world turns on. Today, something is off. The fire still burns steadily, and Hestia is humming as she arranges a stack of pine cones beside the hearth, because apparently even pine cones have a ceremonial order, but there's a subtle tension in the air. Like when someone says, I'm fine, and you know they're thinking about starting a tiny war. You soon find out why. Apollo and Poseidon have both shown up with gifts. For Hestia. She sighs, so softly you almost miss it, and nudges you behind the olive jar. Just let it play out, she murmurs. Apparently, a long time ago, both Apollo and Poseidon asked for Hestia's hand in marriage. On the same day. At the same celestial brunch. In front of everyone. It did not go well. They had, in classic Olympian fashion, both written poems. Poseidon's involved waves and horses. Apollo's was a musical number with lyre accompaniment and backup muses. It was awkward, overproduced, and very shiny. And Hestia. She thanked them both politely, stood up, and said, actually, I'd rather stay single forever and tend the fire. Then she made a vow of eternal virginity, swore it on the river Styx, and sat back down with her tea. Historians still debate whether this was a calculated move to dodge divine dating drama or a heartfelt declaration of peace through solitude. Either way, it worked. Sort of. Poseidon sulked for a century and redirected a river out of spite. Apollo composed a tragic ballad that no one dared critique. Hestia went right back to polishing candlesticks and offering figs to guests. Now, centuries later, they're still trying to win her over. Today's bribes, gifts, include a harp that never goes out of tune and a conch shell that makes the sound of gentle applause when you hold it to your ear. Hestia thanks them both with genuine grace and puts the items neatly on a side shelf labeled Miscellaneous Divine Tokens. Then she returns to her cushion and resumes stirring a pot of honeyed barley. You're stunned. You turned down two gods, you whisper. At once. I wasn't interested, she replies. And they weren't offering love. They were offering attention. You pause. The fire pops softly beside you. She adds, also, Poseidon's poems always rhyme sea with me and eternity. He's not exactly subtle. You try to imagine Hestia in a typical Olympian romance. Scandals, disguises, dramatic declarations, but it doesn't fit. She isn't Aphrodite, weaving seduction like silk. She isn't Hera, guarding marriage with iron resolve. She's warmth. She's solitude by choice. She's the kind of peace that doesn't need anyone to validate it. She tells you about how unusual her vow was. Not just among gods, among anyone. In a culture where marriage was considered essential, especially for women, choosing a life of independence was radical. But Hestia didn't argue. She didn't make a speech. She just lived differently. Some historians think she may be the most feminist figure in the pantheon, but of course, Hestia would never use that word. She'd just smile and offer you soup. There's a fringe theory, one you read once in a dusty scroll, that Hestia wasn't ignoring desire, but redirecting it. That her celibacy wasn't a denial of intimacy, but a transformation of it. She gave warmth instead of passion, stillness instead of seduction. and in doing so, created a form of love that wasn't transactional, or dramatic, or explosive. You try to articulate this, but all that comes out is, "So, you just didn't want a boyfriend." Hestia chuckles. "Not then. Not ever. I had a half." And honestly, it makes sense. Fire, after all, is demanding. It needs constant care. You can't just light it and walk away. It wants to be seen, fed, listened to. Hestia didn't need a partner. She already had a relationship. With the flame. With peace. With herself. She hands you a folded cloth. "Polish the incense holders, will you? The gods will be back soon with something louder." And they are. Dionysus bursts in with wine that glows like starlight and insists Hestia try it. Hermes shows up with a tiny mechanical bird that recites flirty limericks. Even Artemis offers her a bow engraved with soft moonlight. Hestia accepts every offering, not because she wants them, but because rejecting them would cause more noise than she's willing to endure. Each gift goes neatly onto the miscellaneous divine tokens shelf, which is now alarmingly full. Later, after the gods have drifted off in search of new chaos, Hestia sits beside you and says, "They don't understand. To them, being alone means being without. But to me, it's being with myself." You nod, slowly. Then try to say something wise, but instead sneeze because one of the incense holders puffed cinnamon directly into your nose. Hestia hands you a napkin. "Bless you," she says. "Also, maybe polish that one outside." That night, as the sky dims and the stars are low, you sit beside her as the fire flickers. She's weaving something now, thread made from sunlight and ash, looping in gentle spirals. "No one weaves anymore," she says. "They are too busy performing." You ask what she's weaving. "A quiet life," she says. "One row at a time." And the fire hums its agreement. The next day starts, as all good days should, with the smell of warm bread and a perfectly balanced fire. You've graduated from kindling assistant to full-fledged flame steward, which sounds prestigious until you realize it mostly means shooing off Hermes when he tries to toast marshmallows on a stick made from Apollo's lyre. Still, there's a rhythm to life now, a soft cadence. You measure your time in sprigs of rosemary and the angle of the sunlight on the marble floor. And as you stir honey into porridge for the 6th time this morning, you wonder aloud, do you ever miss the chaos? Hestia looks up from her cushion, where she's neatly untangling a spool of thread that may or may not contain stars. "Chaos doesn't need an invitation," she says. "It always shows up on its own." And sure enough, right on cue, there's a boom in the distance. Not thunder. This time it's as chasing Eros across the hall because of some misunderstanding involving love arrows and a toga. Hestia doesn't even flinch. She moves a bowl out of the way just before it gets trampled. You don't know how she knew. She just did. As things settle again, you realize you haven't yet asked her the real question. The one that's been flickering at the edge of your thoughts since you arrived. Why choose this life? Why stay a virgin goddess? Why not have the whole dramatic, love-struck, scandal-filled experience? Hestia smiles, gently, always gently, and says, "Because someone has to keep the tea warm." She gestures to the hearth, and suddenly, you see it, the metaphor made real. The divine flame isn't just fire. It's stability, safety, a place to return to when everyone else is throwing lightning bolts or falling in and out of enchanted love. Her virginity isn't about denial, it's about clarity, a choice to belong to no one and everyone at once. Virgin goddesses in Greek mythology are an interesting lot. Artemis is fiercely independent and deadly with a bow. Athena is all strategy and steel, her relationships mostly involving spears and long lectures. But Hestia, her virginity doesn't shout. It whispers. It says, "I'm here. I'm whole. I don't need more." Historians still debate what her vow really meant. Was it social commentary? A rebellion against the patriarchal pantheon? A theological metaphor for unchanging purity? Or was it, quite simply, a preference for peace? Hestia isn't interested in defining it. The hearth, she says, doesn't explain itself. It just gives warmth. Later, as you dust the shelves of offering bowls, carefully avoiding the one that once sang hymns when touched, you stumble upon a tiny silver plaque. It reads, "Hestia, first and last." You ask her about it, and she nods. "It's what they say at ceremonies," she explains. "Every prayer, Every feast, every offering, begins and ends with me. This surprises you. You. But you're never even in the stories. She smiles. That's the point. In ancient Greek practice, Hestia's presence bookend every ritual. No matter the god being on it, be it loud Zeus or dramatic Dionysus, it was Hestia who came first and last, a nod to her role as both origin and conclusion. The spark and the ember. You look at the plaque again. Does that mean you are the Alpha and Omega? More like the teacup and the saucer, she replies, setting down a basket of dried figs. In the corner of the room, a statue of Hera sneezes, possibly a divine allergy to being upstaged, and Hestia gently mists the air with rosewater. You can't help but compare her to the others. Hera, regal and exacting. Aphrodite, dazzling and dramatic. Demeter, earthy and occasionally furious. And Hestia, the only one who doesn't make you feel like you're about to be judged for your olive-cutting technique. There's a certain irony in it all. In a pantheon defined by larger-than-life personalities, the one goddess who refuses to be fleshy ends up holding everything together. That night, she lets you feed the fire. You use a bundle of thyme, pressed laurel, and what she calls sun-soaked linen, a fancy way of saying a divine scrap of fabric that smells like naps. As the flame flares briefly, casting soft gold on the stone walls, she begins humming again. A low tune, with no words, older than Olympus itself. You lean back, feeling its rhythm settle into your bones. And in that quiet, you realize something. Hestia is the absence of chaos. Not in a vacuum sense, not blankness, but in the way soft music is the absence of shouting, and warm hands are the absence of fear. She doesn't fight for control. She simply is control. Effortless, calm, eternal. You curl near the fire again, the embers painting lazy shadows across the floor. Hestia pulls a blanket over your shoulders, woven from clouds, you think, and says, "You did well today." You mumble something about spilled barley, but she waves it off. Even embers need tending. And so you sleep. Not because the world is silent, but because she makes it feel safe enough to rest. You wake slowly, to the sound of a wooden ladle clinking against a bronze pot and the smell of roasted chestnuts drifting through the cool morning air. The marble beneath your cheek is warm, always warm. It's the hearth, of course. Even when the gods are off storming Troy or turning into swans or doing whatever nonsense immortals get up to, Hestia's fire never goes out. You sit up and stretch, joints crackling like pine in the flame, and Hestia nods at you from across the room. She's sprinkling dried mint into a simmering broth, not because it needs it, but because someone might appreciate it later. That's just how she is. You suspect she's the kind of person who irons her pillowcases even when no one's visiting. Today's task is special. You're taking a field trip. Sort of. You're coming with me to Athens, Hestia says, tying her hair up with a ribbon that seems to shimmer like dawn. Or at least, the part of me that lives there. You blink. Wait, you live in Athens? I live everywhere, she replies with a small smile. But the city flame needs a little love. In ancient Greece, nearly every city had a public hearth, a sacred flame that symbolized not just Hestia's presence, but the unity of the people. It burned in the Prytaneum, the town hall, tended constantly by officials or priestesses. If that flame died, it wasn't just bad luck, it was a spiritual crisis. So when a new colony was founded, they would literally carry a flame from the old hearth to the new. Like a torch of identity. No gods descending from clouds, no exploding thunderbolts, just a quiet spark, passed hand to hand. You follow Hestia through the veil of mist that separates Olympus from the mortal world. You feel your ears pop and the world tilts like a plate under too much soup, but soon you're standing in a sunlit courtyard, surrounded by olive trees and the distant buzz of city life. This is Athens. And the hearth is here. Not just a fire pit. It's surrounded by carefully placed stones, painted offerings, and a faint, lovely aroma of charcoal, roses, and old incense. A man in a white tunic kneels before it, lips moving in prayer. He doesn't notice you. He can't see you. But Hestia watches him with a look that could melt marble. This, she says softly, is the heart of the city. You look around. Beyond the columns and fig trees, merchants yell, children chase each other with toy chariots, and someone is attempting to convince a goat to leave a fountain. But here, it's calm. Here, the chaos fades. Historians still argue whether Hestia's worship was widespread out of genuine reverence, or just because people didn't want to accidentally offend the goddess of the hearth and end up with cold soup forever. But there's no denying her flame symbolized something deeply primal: home. And that mattered, especially when wars broke out, or famine struck, or a new tyrant decided olives were too round and needed regulation. In those moments, people looked to the hearth, not just for warmth, but for belonging. You kneel next to the flame. The heat is subtle, not scorching, like someone cupping your hands inside theirs. You swear the fire flickers in time with your breath. Hestia takes out a small clay vessel from her sleeve. She pours a few drops of oil into the flame. It hisses softly, then glows brighter. Olive oil, she explains. Always local. The flame recognizes the land. Quirky fact of the day: ancient Greeks didn't just feed their fires wood. They added herbs, wine, even cakes. Offerings meant for the gods, sure, but also to scent the air and sweeten the mood. Imagine lighting a divine Yankee candle before a meeting with your local council. As you sit in the quiet, a young girl, barefoot, wearing a tunic 2 sizes too big, skips past the temple gates, holding a clay lamp. She's careful, so careful, not to let the flame inside flicker too much. She's taking it home. Her mother probably sent her. Tonight, their family hearth will be relit from the city's sacred fire. And just like that, Hestia's influence multiplies. One flame becomes 10, then 50, then hundreds. Every home with a fire lit from hers becomes an extension of her presence. Not in a flashy, omnipotent way, but in bowls of stew, quiet dinners, shared laughter, and the crackle of pine cones as the night grows colder. Do they know it's you? You ask, watching the girl disappear into the narrow streets. They don't need to, Hestia says. They just need the warmth. You think about modern cities. No hearths, really. No sacred flames in city halls. But even now, there are eternal flames burning in places like Arlington, or under memorials, or at Olympic Games. All echoes of this. Of her. And there's something else, too. Pizza ovens glowing in New York. Campfires crackling in backyards. Gas stoves sputtering to life as someone makes breakfast half asleep. Everywhere there's flame, there's a little whisper of Hestia. But back in Athens, the day fades. Hestia stands and smooths her robes. Time to go, she says. You linger a second longer. Just enough to whisper thanks to the fire, not because it's polite, but because something inside you wants to. The flame flickers in acknowledgement. Back on Olympus, the palace is, somehow, louder. Dionysus has returned from a minor vineyard accident, and Apollo is ranting about someone auto-tuning his lyre. But you and Hestia move quietly through it all, like a pair of ghosts. Later, over lentil stew and fresh goat cheese, you ask her how many hearths she's connected to, how many flames she watches. She shrugs, wiping her hands on a cloth embroidered with tiny acorns. Enough, she says. And then she adds, almost absent-mindedly, when they light it in the morning and gather around it at night, they remember something, even if they don't know what. That's enough. And you realize, she doesn't need to be seen to matter. Her power isn't in being worshipped. It's in being felt. A god of comfort, of return, of the one warm spot in a very cold universe. You stare into the flames a little longer before bed. And just like that, everything feels a little more home. You wake this time to the sound of feathers. Not birdsong, actual feathers, swishing as Hermes flies by with scrolls flapping from under each arm, muttering something about a package lost in Delphi. You're barely upright before a loaf of barley bread lands in your lap. Courtesy of Demeter, apparently. Hestia just gestures at it from across the hearth with a look that says, eat before the chaos finds you. Today, you're staying home. Well, her home. Olympus. Because it's cleaning day. Wait, yes. The gods have a cleaning day. And you're helping. No one ever thinks about it, Hestia says, handing you a bundle of thyme and a feather duster that smells like beeswax and divine regret. But someone's got to keep the thrones from getting sticky. You trail her as she moves through the grand halls of Olympus, every step as graceful as the flame she tends. It's all marble and gold, columns carved with scenes of heroic battles, and a suspicious smudge that looks like Dionysus tried to recreate a wine fountain indoors. Again, here's the thing no one writes epics about. Even immortals leave a mess. And someone has to keep Olympus from turning into a divine frat house. That someone, Hestia. She doesn't rule thunder or war or wisdom. But without her, The place would smell like sour ambrosia and old sandals. You quietly wipe down Aphrodite's mirror, while Hestia polishes Hera's throne with a lemon-scented cloth. There's something oddly soothing about this, the way she moves, the steady rhythm of care. You wonder if she's ever taken a day off. Once, she says, somehow hearing your thoughts. Didn't go well. The muses tried to organize a feast. It ended with a goat on the roof and someone summoning a swarm of bees by accident. You snort, and she smiles. Historically speaking, Hestia never got tangled up in the drama of her siblings. No Olympian scandals, no turning mortals into trees or bulls or awkward constellations. Ancient records say she gave up her seat on the divine council, willingly, when Dionysus arrived, just to keep the peace. Historians still argue whether she truly did it out of grace or whether Zeus gently suggested she step aside. Either way, she didn't make a fuss. She simply returned to the hearth and kept the fires burning. But that doesn't mean she vanished. Far from it. Hestia's presence in Olympus is quiet but constant, like a clock ticking just below hearing range. You don't notice her until you realize you haven't tripped over anything all day and your soup is exactly the right temperature. She even keeps the ambrosia pantry organized. You peek inside and marvel at shelves of glowing jars, fruit that looks like it was plucked from a dream, and a single enchanted spatula that stirs things by itself. She labels everything in perfect script: nectar, aged; ambrosia, fig-infused; do not open unless emotionally prepared. You find a dusty scroll tucked between shelves. It's a menu, written in ancient Ionic Greek. Apparently, she once hosted a dinner that lasted 7 days and involved a performance by Apollo and a cheese sculpture of Mount Etna. No one remembers the food, of course. They remember the warmth. The way the air smelled like honey and bay leaves. The way Hestia made even us stop shouting long enough to enjoy dessert. Quirky tidbit time. Some temples didn't even have statues of Hestia. Just the flame. Because she was the fire. Not its guardian. Not its symbol. Its essence. You didn't need to sculpt her. You just had to sit close, feel the warmth, and understand. Back in the hall, you help her rehang a tapestry someone knocked askew. It's a depiction of the founding of Olympus. Titan battles, heroic struggles, probably something on fire. Hestia's nowhere in the image. But you catch her staring at the background, where a tiny, flickering flame glows in the corner. She nods once. Still burning, she says. Lunch is simple. Lentils, olives, a hunk of barley bread now slightly singed from being too close to the hearth. You sit on cushions that smell like thyme and ash. No one else joins you. And that's okay. It's peaceful. Hestia tells you about an old mortal who once invited her into their home. No temple, no offering. Just a pot of stew, shared with neighbors. They didn't even know my name, she says, chuckling. But the fire was warm, and the food was good, and no one left hungry. That's what matters. You ask if she misses the attention. The shrines. The festivals. She shakes her head. It was never about me. It's about what I keep alive. You glance around. Olympus may be grand, but it's also lived in. Cracks in the marble from too many divine stomps. A statue with a pigeon problem. Half a lyre string tangled around a tree. But it's warm. Because of her. Even here, even surrounded by gods who roar and shine and clash with the fury of meteors, she's the steady heartbeat. The caretaker. The reason this palace in the clouds doesn't crumble under divine ego. Sometimes, she says, being powerful just means showing up. Quietly. And suddenly you think of every unnoticed hand that keeps things moving. Parents making lunches before sunrise, janitors sweeping empty halls, nurses adjusting pillows while others sleep. Maybe Hestia never left. Maybe she just changes shape. You finish your bread. The fire crackles beside you. For a moment, Olympus feels almost human. Almost home. You're still curled near the hearth, crumbs on your tunic and the last of the lentils stuck between your teeth, when the bronze doors swing open with a creak. A breeze swirls through the hall, not cold, but strange. It smells like parchment, pine resin, and frustration. That can only mean one thing. Athena's back. She strides in like a thundercloud in reading glasses, scrolls under one arm, owl perched on the other, muttering something about logic and that idiotic forged smoke clogging the archives. The owl looks mildly embarrassed on her behalf. Hestia barely blinks. She lifts a kettle off the flames and pours out 2 cups of something herbal and terrifyingly green. You watch as Athena pauses, sniffs, then accepts it with a grunt that may or may not be gratitude. And just like that, the storm passes. That's Hestia's specialty, storm calming. Not just with tea and tact, but by being so solid, so endlessly composed, that others seem to orbit her without colliding. It wasn't always this way, of course. There was a time, historians suggest long before the Olympians set up shop atop their mountain, when Hestia had to earn her place. Myths say she was the first swallowed by Cronus, and the last to be vomited out. The oldest and the youngest Olympian, all at once. Poetic, isn't it? Historians still argue whether that symbolic rebirth made her the spiritual keystone of the pantheon, or whether it just meant Zeus owed her a massive favor and eternal hearth rights in every temple. You stretch, soot-streaked and very much underqualified for celestial maintenance, as Hestia rises again, gently dusts her skirts, and continues her rounds. This time, you follow her outside. The Olympian courtyard is glowing, twilight eternal up here, a soft lilac sky with clouds grazing the marble steps. You pass a fountain that occasionally hiccups wine, Dionysus again, a tree with golden apples that glares if you pick too many, and a training ring where Ars is somehow losing a solo sparring match. Hestia waves. He scowls, trips, and pretends it was a tactical role. She never mocks them. That's part of her genius. You get the sense she knows all their stories, every tantrum, every triumph, but keeps them safely tucked away like childhood drawings. Embarrassing but cherished. It's not long before you arrive at her second half. Yes, she keeps another one. A backup. An outer fire pit tucked at the edge of Olympus, where wind meets stone. It's ancient, built from volcanic rock, carved with names you don't recognize. Older than Greek. Maybe older than time. Quirky tidbit here. Some cults believed Hestia's flame could hear prayers whispered across the world, transmitted through smoke. Like the first divine Wi-Fi. She crouches beside it now, rearranging logs, her fingers trailing embers without ever burning. You watch the fire flicker and shift colors. Crimson, gold, sapphire, like it's remembering something. Maybe it is. Sometimes, she murmurs, I light this just to remind myself I still exist. Quiet things get forgotten, you know. You nod, even though you're not entirely sure what she means. But there's a weight to her words. Like she's felt the edges of oblivion brushing her sleeve. And maybe that's the paradox of immortality. Not that you live forever, but that people assume you do. That you'll always be there. That you don't need celebration or memory or stories. But stories are how gods survive. So, you ask her, who remembers her? She shrugs. Some still leave an ember burning when they move to a new home. Some whisper thanks when the soup turns out perfect. Some write me into bedtime tales without knowing why. She pokes the fire with a stick that's probably older than Athens. Not everything sacred needs applause, she adds. Still, you get the sense that maybe, just maybe, she misses being seen. This whole day, dusting statues, brewing tea, fixing loose floor tiles, might have seemed mundane if it weren't so essential. Hestia isn't a goddess of fire. She's the reason you come in from the cold. There's a myth, half lost in time, that she once wandered the mortal world during winter, disguised as an old woman. Wherever she stopped, frost melted. Not from magic, but from warmth shared. A loaf of bread offered. A blanket tucked gently over sleeping children. No thunderclaps. No monster slaying. Just presence. Historians have found references to festivals once held in her honor, mostly in rural towns. Simple affairs. Light a new hearth fire, share a meal, tell a quiet story. Nothing flashy. Just real. You stare into the flames, mesmerized. The fire seems to pulse with memory, as if it's replaying 1,000 forgotten homes at once. Mud brick cottages, marble halls, mountain huts with leaky roofs. All warmed by the same sacred glow. And for a moment, you feel it. That connection. As if every hearth ever lit is part of a single great fire, burning through time, tended by one patient goddess who never asks for praise. You want to add a log? She asks. You do. The wood catches instantly. No smoke, no fuss. See, she says, smiling. It's not hard to keep it alive. You just have to care. A breeze rustles your tunic. The owl hoots distantly. Somewhere in the halls of Olympus, someone drops a lyre and curses in ancient Dorian. Hestia doesn't flinch. She just turns back to her fire, humming something low and ancient. a lullaby from a time when stars were still being named. And you sit beside her, warmed, soot-dusted, quiet. You don't speak. You don't need to. The fire crackles. The wind softens. And Olympus, in all its wild, golden, noisy glory, feels safe. A yawn creeps up on you, slow and inevitable, as Hestia stands. She stretches, not with grandeur, but like someone who's been sitting cross-legged too long and is mildly regretting it. Her joints don't crack, because of course they don't. She's a goddess. You, on the other hand, sound like a broken cart axle. She pats the ash from her robes and says, "Time to check on the temples." You're about to ask which one, but the world sort of folds. One blink, and Olympus vanishes. Another blink, and you're somewhere else entirely. Feet sinking into warm clay, cicadas screeching in the olive trees, and the acrid smell of incense prickling your nostrils. You're in a temple courtyard. Corinth, maybe. Rhodes. It's hard to tell. Geography's a little wobbly when you're moving through divine perception. Hestia is already at work, sweeping invisible dust from the threshold. The temple isn't grand, no gold leaf, no 30-foot Zeus statue flexing, but it feels sacred. A small hearth in the center flickers steadily, even as the wind nudges through. A local priest nods to her without surprise. He doesn't see her, not really, but he feels her presence. Like the comfort of being watched by someone who wants nothing from you. Historical fact, Hestia had no public cults on the scale of Apollo or Athena. No massive temples bearing her name. Instead, she was part of every temple's inner sanctum. A constant, quiet participant in the rituals of others. Even in offerings to different gods, a portion was reserved for her first. Like spiritual tipping etiquette. You pause by the hearth, drawn in by the dance of flame. Hestia, meanwhile, is adjusting the placement of the offering bowls. She straightens a few pebbles along the rim, mutters something about symmetry, and sighs. They keep using thyme instead of rosemary. I'm not mad, just disappointed. That's the thing. Hestia notices everything. And she doesn't scold. She corrects with love, like someone who believes the world wants to get better, if only it knew how. You walk with her through temple after temple, some busy, some abandoned. One sits in the ruins of a town swallowed by time, ivy choking the columns and birds nesting in the nooks. Still, the hearth is warm. A fire burns, small and stubborn. You're not sure how. Quirky tidbit. Some archaeologists have found scorched stones in odd corners of ancient homes, places where no cooking should have happened. Some believe these were miniature shrines to Hestia, kept separate from daily bustle. A secret fire for a secret devotion. She kneels at this ancient hearth, eyes soft, hands cradling the flickering flames like there's something fragile and dear. You sit beside her, and neither of you speaks for a long while. Eventually, she says, most gods thrive on spectacle. Worship, fear, spectacle, all the same coin. I don't. I thrive on care, on little things done right. You nod, hoping she doesn't ask you about the last time you did the little things right, like laundry, or flossing. Do you know why people invite me into new homes first? She asks. Because I don't bring thunder or passion or clever words. I bring belonging. That quiet word echoes, belonging, like a soft drumbeat through your chest. Historians still argue whether this tradition of invoking Hestia first was purely ritualistic or tied to deeper metaphysical beliefs about safety and continuity. Some say it was just good manners. Others believe failing to honor Hestia meant the gods wouldn't bother listening to your prayers at all. Like showing up to a wedding and skipping the bride. From this ruined temple, you travel again, not by magic carpet or glowing portal, but the old-fashioned way, walking. Which means you're now trudging through a dusty countryside, your sandals full of pebbles, and your back damp from sun and sweat. Hestia glides beside you, unbothered. She even hums a little as she walks. You don't recognize the tune. It's probably from 3,000 years ago, back when melodies were traded like gossip. You arrive at a small farmhouse perched on a hill. There's a family inside, parents, children, a grandparent who's pretending not to nap. In the kitchen, a hearth glows. And there she is again, present, barely noticeable, a soft warmth around the room. The children argue. Someone drops a bowl. A dog barks. The world spins, messily. But that fire in the center of the home? Steady, unshaken. It's her, not in the flames themselves, but but in the fact they stay lit. You step back outside as the sun sets, turning the fields gold. Hestia stands with you, arms crossed loosely, like a sentinel who doesn't need armor. "I don't ask for temples," she says. "I ask for intention. That's all. Keep the flame. Feed it. Know that it matters."
A moment passes.
A breeze kicks up. Somewhere in the distance, a lyre plays out of tune. And Hestia laughs, lightly, musically, like someone remembering an inside joke with the universe. She turns to you, eyes twinkling, and says, "Come on. We've got one more place to visit before the night gets too cold." You follow, no longer questioning. The path ahead isn't lit by torches or moonlight, but by something gentler, an ember that refuses to die. You follow Hestia into what might be the quietest night you've ever known. Even the crickets seem to hush themselves as you move along the path, less a road, really, and more a suggestion of direction through a silver-dusted field. Moonlight glints off olive leaves. The sky above is cluttered with stars, the kind of sky that makes you feel like you're under a colander poked full of holes by some divine fork. You glance at Hestia. She's walking ahead, silent for now, her posture unhurried, almost meditative. If she's tired, she doesn't show it. Her serenity seems to smooth the air itself. You take a deeper breath than you meant to. Eventually, you arrive at a modest homestead. Not ancient, not even mythic. It's modern. You blink. There's a porch light. A cat curled on a doormat. Inside, the faint blue flicker of a television bounces across the walls. The smell of garlic bread wafts faintly through the night. And yet, you feel her presence here too. She sits beside the gas fireplace. Yes, gas, and watches the flame with the same reverence she did in Corinth or Rhodes or wherever that crumbled temple had been. You settle beside her. It's weirdly comforting. The whir of a ceiling fan, the hum of a fridge, it's all just home noise. And it fits her. "People think I was left behind," she says, not looking at you, "because I stepped down from Olympus." Ah, that. The famously humble goddess who gave up her throne for Dionysus, the chaos party boy with a grape addiction. Scholars love that anecdote. Hestia, they say, was too gentle for the politics of the gods. She chose the hearth over the high seat. Mainstream fact. Ancient texts mention that Hestia relinquished her Olympian throne to avoid conflict. Her spot went to Dionysus, making her one of the few gods to voluntarily step aside. Which, if you're keeping score, is basically like someone declining a private jet so the guy doing keg stands on Mount Pelion can have a seat. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient playwrights portrayed Hestia as a bit of a pushover, never raising her voice, always deferring. But in local traditions, especially among older rural communities, she was invoked during childbirth, land blessings, even wine fermentation. Not loud, but everywhere. Historians still argue whether I ever truly left Olympus, she muses. They say I stepped down, but I was never really up there, not in the way they think. I was the fire they sat around. That gets you. The idea that a throne might not be a chair, but a presence, a warmth, a thing everyone needs, but no one notices until it goes cold. You wonder how many people in your own life are thrones without titles. Inside the house, a family finishes dinner. A child clutches a plate too big for their hands. Someone drops a fork. No one yells. There's a softness to the clatter. Hestia nods toward them. See, I don't need to be worshipped. I just need to be remembered. You try to imagine her with a thunderbolt or a winged helmet or a shield like the other gods. You can't. Her power isn't in showy symbols, it's in continuity, in not breaking, in being the person who waits up for others to come home. She stands, brushes non-existent ash from her robes again, and gives the fire one last glance. It flickers obligingly. Then you're walking again, somewhere between myth and suburbia. You pass a school gym with a janitor humming off-key, a hospital hallway where a nurse cradles a coffee cup like it's sacred, a tiny apartment window with a single candle glowing beside a photo of someone clearly missed. She's there, in all of it. You reach a small shrine nestled in a grove. Not ancient, not even registered on any tourist map. Just cared for. Someone has swept the stone clean. There's a small dish with coins, a few herbs, rosemary, this time, not time, and a flame. No lighter fluid. No switch. Just flame. Hestia approaches it the way one might approach an old friend they haven't seen in years but have always loved. She kneels and murmurs something in a language you don't know. Could be Greek. Could be older than language itself. She motions for you to sit beside her again. This one, she says quietly, was lit by a woman who didn't believe in gods. She just believed in quiet places. You nod. That sounds like her kind of person. She comes here sometimes. Never speaks. Just sits. Leaves a flower. You look around, and sure enough, nestled behind the stone is a single fresh daisy, out of place in a late season. You think I need temples, Hestia continues, but all I need is someone who keeps something alive. A flame. A habit. A kindness. You stare into the fire for a long time. It doesn't crackle. It pulses softly, like a slow heartbeat. Your breathing slows to match it. You're not sure if that's magic or just you being tired. Either way, it feels right. Hestia closes her eyes and lets her shoulders fall. Most gods take. I keep. It's not a boast. It's a simple truth. You sit there until the night turns velvety and quiet. No need for words. No need for movement. Just warmth. Stillness. Flame. You're still by the shrine. The fire flickers. The breeze has shifted slightly, brushing past your cheek like a cool exhale from some forgotten god asleep in the hillside. Hestia rises. She doesn't stretch. She doesn't need to. Somehow she seems as fresh now as she did hours ago, when you started this whole mythical sleepwalk. You, on the other hand, are starting to feel like someone left you on a too-soft couch during a family movie night. Legs numb, thoughts drifting, blanket optional. She looks at you, ready for the archives. You blink. There are archives. She smiles. Of course. Where else do you think the forgotten stories go? And just like that, you're walking again, past the shrine, through a low arch covered in ivy that wasn't there 5 seconds ago. A staircase leads downward. You descend. 1, 2, 3 steps. Then you lose count, and maybe time bends just a little. You emerge into a vast, round room lit entirely by gentle firelight. No bulbs, no neon, just little flames dancing in glass spheres. Shelves arc along the walls like rings in a tree trunk, each one filled with scrolls, ledgers, and clay tablets. This isn't Olympus. This isn't Athens. This is somewhere that isn't supposed to exist. This, Hestia whispers, is where I keep what no one asks about. You drift past one shelf, a scroll labeled The Bread That Fed 2 Cities. Another, The First Candle Carried to Sea. And another, Why We Still Wait at Windows. These aren't war stories. They're not about gods fighting titans or lovers turning into trees. These are the quiet bits, snippets of how the world stayed sane. You pluck a small clay disc from a shelf. It's warm to the touch. A faint hum vibrates against your palm, like a cat purring in reverse. On it is etched, a sister's fire kept during war. You don't read it. You feel it. 1,000 cold nights. A girl shielding her siblings with her back against the wind. A meal split 5 ways. The sound of teeth chattering and still choosing to smile. She never made it into the epics, Hestia says, standing beside you. But she kept the line going. Mainstream fact. In Homeric society, it was often the women, mothers, daughters, wives, who kept traditions, hearth fires, and family structures intact during times of war. While the bards sang of swords and sails, homes were quietly preserved by those left behind. Quirky tidbit. In some rural Greek villages, it's still custom to keep a small olive oil lamp burning continuously in the house, representing the ever-living flame of Hestia. And yes, even when there's a power outage, those tiny lamps somehow survive with half a teaspoon of oil and the stubbornness of a grandmother who told you not to touch it. Historians still argue whether these small rituals actually shaped broader social cohesion, Hestia adds. They say they're symbolic. I say they're survival. She gestures, and a scroll gently floats from a shelf and unfurls in midair. On it is written a single name. Below it, a list of meals served to the hungry. Not heroic feasts. Just bread, lentils, honeyed milk. She fed others. No miracles. No flames from heaven. Just warmth. Daily. You're silent. This archive isn't about preserving glory. It's about honoring consistency. You begin to notice that the firelight in the room isn't just from the glass orbs on the walls. The scrolls themselves emit a faint glow, knowledge that doesn't scream for attention, but insists on being remembered. You find a shelf labeled simply, almost forgotten. You read snippets here and there. The woman who lit the temple incense even after the priests were gone. The child who returned every night to straighten fallen stones. The soldier who never spoke of war, only of bread recipes. None of these people had statues. No temples bore their names. But they had one thing in common. They kept something going. The fire. The home. The rhythm of a world trying not to fall apart. You know, Hestia says gently, they always think of me as soft. You glance at her. She doesn't look soft. She looks like granite left in the sun. But keeping something alive when everything is trying to fall apart? That's not softness. That's resistance. She walks past the archive, and the scrolls roll shut, the clay tablets still humming faintly. You follow, your steps echoing just slightly louder than before, like your own presence is growing more solid in this space. You pass a final door, smaller, unmarked. Hestia opens it with one hand. Inside is a room no bigger than a pantry. A hearth, simple, stone. A single chair. A shelf with 2 books and 1 clay pot of time. The air smells like dust and saffron and old wood. This, she says, was the first room. You look around. There's nothing divine about it. No celestial light beams. No harp music. But you feel something. Presence. You sit in the chair. The stone is warm. The fire burns low, but steady. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. You stay there a while, resting, and let the silence do the heavy lifting. Time slows here. The hearth flickers softly in that tiny room, the first room, as Hestia called it. You sit quietly in the warm chair, and somehow, the stone cushion feels softer than any feather bed. The firelight pulses like a heartbeat, and the smell, burnt thyme, cracked cedar, and a ghost of old bread, wraps around your senses like a lullaby sung in a language you don't quite remember. Hestia says nothing. She lets you sit. And isn't that strange? On Mount Olympus, where gods have debates that crack mountains, this one gives you silence. No riddles. No demands. Just permission to be still. Eventually, the fire shifts. The shadows rearrange themselves. And she stands. One more place, she murmurs, as if afraid to wake the dust. You follow. The air grows cooler, thinner. The walls, narrower. And then you emerge into an open grove, moonlit, ancient, perfectly round. No shrines. No statues. Just a wide clearing, grass cropped low, the sky wide and endless above. This, Hestia says, was the boundary. You don't ask boundary of what. You feel it. That liminal edge between Olympus and everything else. This isn't a gate. It's a seam. She walks to the center, barefoot now, and kneels. There's no ceremony. No celestial thunder. And then you see them, others. Quiet figures emerging from the woods. Some in robes. Some in dusty tunics. Some barefoot, others armored. They don't speak. They sit around the grove in a wide ring. All of them are holding small objects. A burnt spoon, a strip of cloth, a lock of hair, a smooth stone. These are the keepers, Hestia says softly. Mainstream fact. In ancient Greek households, domestic rituals weren't overseen by temple priests but by the head of the home, usually the woman. Offerings were made daily to Hestia at the family hearth, and it was a flame that sanctified births, marriages, and even travel. Quirky tidbit. A few classical scholars believe that the hearth's positioning in Greek homes, dead center, where smoke would rise through an open hole, was symbolic of Hestia's gaze directly reaching the heavens. Kind of like having divine Wi-Fi routed through the fireplace. Historians still argue whether the grove ever existed outside allegory, Hestia says. Some say it's just metaphor, a mental resting place. Others claim it was real, before time got too loud. You're watching as the figures settle in, each lighting a tiny lamp in front of them. No matches. No lighters. The flames seem to awaken, not ignite. There's no heat. Just glow. These are memories, Hestia continues, of those who quietly held the world in place when it could have cracked. You spot a woman in a linen shift. Her hands are weathered, but she holds a tiny wooden toy, worn smooth. Her flame flickers blue. Next to her, a man in armor rests a chipped cup in front of him. The kind of cup soldiers carry, not for water, but to give someone else their last drink. Then a child. He can't be more than 6, but his shoulders are firm. His lamp sits in a circle of small stones, and he hums, softly, as if to someone who's not here. They don't belong to Olympus, Hestia says. They belong to moments. They were never worshipped, but they were remembered. She doesn't say by who. Maybe by no one. Maybe by you. Now, as you watch, you notice something else. Each lamp, each flame, begins to send out a thread of light. Thin, barely visible. They stretch across the grove like spider silk, connecting lamp to lamp, person to person, moment to moment. And then, in the center, Hestia sits again. Her own lamp, just a simple clay bowl, doesn't glow. It burns. Quietly. Deeply. The color of sunrise behind closed eyelids. This, she says, is how we hold the edges. You blink. You're not sure if she means the edge of Olympus, or reality, or simply sanity. But you feel it. You look up. The sky hasn't changed. Still that deep velvet blue, scattered with stars. But the stars don't twinkle anymore. They hum, like tuning forks finding harmony with the earth below. You begin to understand. This isn't about fire as destruction, or even as comfort. It's about continuity. You remember that archive, the scroll labeled Why We Still Wait at Windows. You understand it now. It wasn't about longing. It was about the people who keep the lights on just in case someone does come home. You take your place at the grove's edge. You sit. You wait. You watch. And without asking permission, your own small lamp appears. No big glow. No trumpet of destiny. Just a soft flicker that smells faintly of something from your childhood. Maybe cinnamon? Or the burnt crust of a pie. You're not a god. You're not a hero. But here, that's not what matters. You kept something going. Maybe just once. Maybe often. But you kept it. You didn't let the flame go out. And now, it's joined the circle. You sit there a long time. Maybe a lifetime. Maybe only minutes. But when you glance at Hestia again, she's smiling. Because you've understood. The flame in front of you burns quietly. Its light doesn't boast, doesn't reach far, but it holds its ground. And beside you, all around you, the other flames do the same. A constellation built from memory, endurance, and little acts that no epic ever honored. Hestia watches it all with her hands folded. She doesn't command. She witnesses. After a time, minutes, hours, or maybe that trickle of time that only exists in dreams, she rises. And the grove shifts. The lamps go out, one by one, not in loss but in rest. The keepers fade back into the trees. Some leave behind their tokens, a button, a feather, a ring too small for adult hands. None of it powerful. All of it precious. You stand with her. No words. Just the warm knowing of someone who's been let in. You walk again, back through the narrow path, through the archive, past the room with the time and the first flame. And when you emerge from the ivy-covered arch, it's dawn. The stars have pulled back. The sky blushes the faintest pink. The shrine is still there, still flickering. You turn to her. What happens now? She smiles, not cryptic this time, just kind. You go back. You glance around. Back to where? Her eyes meet yours. To wherever you came from. But you'll go differently. And as she says it, you feel it. The change isn't huge. You're not carrying lightning bolts or sacred scrolls. You're not marked by fire. But there's something quieter inside you now. A kind of gravity. You'll notice the moments other people skip. You'll remember what isn't written down. You'll keep the flame. Do I get to come back? You ask. She raises a brow. You never really left. And just like that, the world shifts. Not with a flash. Not with a sound. But like a breath being exhaled. The grove fades. The warmth lingers. You're back. Somewhere ordinary. A street corner. A kitchen. A train seat. Your lap is empty, but your chest feels full. And deep inside you, something burns on. It will never be loud. But it will never go out. Epilogue. The keeper's light. Somewhere, in a village the maps forgot, a woman places a bowl of stew beside a window every night, just in case the traveler comes back. In a city apartment, A janitor always checks the boiler room last, whispering thanks to the old pipes that kept the heat running one more day. In a quiet kitchen, a child lights a candle not because anyone told them to, but because it feels right. And in a place outside time, past myth, and story and song, the flame still flickers, held by a goddess who asks for nothing, except that we remember, except that we keep.